It all started with an email. Not just any email, an HOA decree from none other than Karen Whitmore, our tyrannical HOA president. She had already outlawed lawn flamingos, banned garage sales, and even tried to make Wednesdays mandatory HOA Appreciation Day. But this time, Karen had truly lost her mind. Effective immediately, all forms of gravity-related nuisances are prohibited in Oak Ridge Estates, the email read. At first, I thought it was a joke. Maybe a typo? But nope. Attached was a full 63-page HOA amendment detailing how gravity was an unsightly force that led to cracked sidewalks, sagging roofs, and unnecessary stress on people's bones. I laughed it off. Everyone did. The neighborhood group chat exploded with memes. Guess we're all floating to work now. Will I get fined if I drop my groceries? What's next? Outlawing oxygen. But then, the HOA inspectors showed up. Karen had hired gravity enforcers, a bunch of clipboard-carrying, self-important buffoons who walked around with spirit levels and balloons. They started fining people for anything that looked like gravity was taking its toll. My neighbor Joe got a $500 fine because his tree was leaning slightly due to a storm. Old man Jenkins got hit with a $1,000 penalty because his porch swing moved downward when he sat in it. And my personal favorite? $750 for Mrs. Ramirez's toddler dropping a cookie on the ground. Karen was serious. But things got weirder. A few days later, Joe swore his lawn furniture started floating. Then Mrs. Ramirez claimed she saw a squirrel hovering midair. I thought they were messing with me until I saw my own mailbox slowly drifting upward, as if gravity had suddenly gone on vacation. And then, one morning, I woke up, stumbled outside with my coffee, and nearly had a heart attack. My entire house was 3 feet off the ground. Something was very, very wrong. I rubbed my eyes. Maybe I was still half asleep. Maybe this was some weird stress dream brought on by HOA nonsense. Nope, my house was floating. Not just mine either, Joe's house. A foot off the ground, Mrs. Ramirez's, tilting slightly midair. Even HOA Karen's house was hovering gracefully like some kind of smug castle in the sky. People ran outside in their pajamas, pointing and screaming. What the why is my car floating? Who took my mailbox? Oh wait, it's up there. Karen, what did you do? Karen, of course, denied everything. She came strutting out of her house in her usual power suit and high heels, clipboard in hand, acting like she was the victim here. Calm down, everyone. This is not my fault, she declared. Gravity is just an outdated concept, and we, as a forward-thinking community, are simply ahead of the curve. Ahead of the curve, our entire neighborhood was turning into an accidental space program. Meanwhile, the chaos continued. Cars that weren't parked in garages drifted into the sky like balloons. Sprinkler systems shot water jets that didn't come down, they just floated like ghostly water blobs. Poor Mr. Jenkins was stuck on his front porch, clutching his rocking chair, which had detached and was slowly spinning midair. And then came the worst part. The HOA inspectors started issuing fines. Sir, your garbage cans are not touching the ground. That's a violation. $2.50 fine. Your dog is floating, ma'am. That's an unregistered airborne pet. $500 penalty. Your child lost a balloon. That's an unauthorized air hazard. $300 charge. Karen was loving it. She twirled her pen, smugly noting violations, while the rest of us panicked about our entire existence literally leaving the earth. Something had to be done. So I called my cousin Mike. Mike wasn't just any guy, he was a physics professor. A real, actual scientist. I explained the situation, half expecting him to hang up on me. Instead, he just muttered, "You're kidding, right?" I sent him a video of my car floating in the driveway, turning slowly like a forgotten asteroid. A long pause. Then, finally, I'll be there in 20 minutes. Whatever was happening, science was about to get involved. And something told me HOA Karen wasn't going to like that. Mike arrived in record time, skidding into my floating driveway in his car. He stepped out, took one look at the neighborhood, and just stood there, blinking. What? In the actual hell? He finally muttered. Around us, chaos reigned. Joe was tying down his mailbox with bungee cords. Mrs. Ramirez was trying to catch her toddler, who was gently drifting toward the roof. And Mr. Jenkins? Still spinning in his floating rocking chair. All right, talk to me, Mike said, rubbing his temples. I explained everything. The HOA's gravity ban. The ridiculous fines. The fact that Karen had somehow willed physics itself into submission. Mike listened, nodding, and finally said, Okay. This is impossible, but it's happening. So, let's figure out why. He pulled out a notebook, a laptop, and some weird sensors that he stuck to the ground, trees, and even my floating mailbox. Meanwhile, Karen had noticed him. And she was not happy. Excuse me. She stormed over, heels clicking. What do you think you're doing? Mike barely looked up. Science. Well, this is HOA property, and we don't allow unsanctioned. Mike held up a hand. Yeah. Listen, lady, your neighborhood is floating. That's not normal. I need to figure out why. Karen scoffed. It's progress. I knew you wouldn't understand people like you were stuck in the past, still obsessed with things like gravity and laws of physics. Mike stared at her like she had just declared herself queen of the moon. Lady, gravity isn't optional. Karen folded her arms. That's what they said about my no garbage can policy, and look how that turned out. For the record, it turned out horribly. Everyone just hid their trash in their garages, and the HOA had to call pest control after a rat infestation took over. Ignoring her, Mike typed away on his laptop. His face slowly twisted into something between horror and amusement. Oh, this is insane, he murmured. What? What is it? I leaned over. He turned the laptop toward me, pointing at some complicated-looking graphs. There's a weird electromagnetic field under the entire neighborhood. Like, really weird. Almost artificial. And guess what? What? Mike grinned. It started the exact day Karen passed her no-gravity rule. I whipped my head toward Karen. What did you do? Karen looked way too smug. I simply found a creative solution. Mike squinted. Karen, did you install some kind of experimental anti-gravity device? Karen sniffed. Of course not. That would be ridiculous. A long pause. Then, Joe, who had been listening, shouted, Then what's that massive metal thing under your lawn? Everyone turned. Right there, half buried in Karen's yard, was a giant, humming metal box. Karen had done something. And now? We were all paying the price. The entire neighborhood gathered in Karen's yard, staring at the mysterious metal box buried beneath her perfectly manicured grass. It was humming softly, vibrating just enough to make the ground feel wrong. Karen folded her arms and sniffed. There is nothing to be concerned about. Karen, I said slowly, why is there a giant, humming sci-fi box under your lawn? She rolled her eyes. Ugh, it's just a small enhancement I had installed for the community. Mike, who was now furiously scanning the device with his laptop, froze. Wait a second. He squinted at the data on his screen. Karen, please tell me you didn't install an experimental anti-gravity field generator. Karen gave him a smug smirk. If I had, it would have been an HOA-approved decision for the greater good of this community. Mike's face turned pale. Oh, you absolute lunatic. Karen huffed. That's Ms. HOA president to you. Mike ignored her and turned to us. Okay, this is bad. Really bad. That thing isn't just messing with gravity, it's getting stronger. Everyone gasped. Wait, stronger? Joe yelled. You mean, we're gonna go even higher? As if to answer him, a car lifted off the street, not drifting slowly like before, but suddenly shooting upward like a rocket. Oh crap. The entire neighborhood erupted into chaos. People scrambled to grab their floating pets, tie down their patio furniture, and hold on to their houses before they drifted into orbit. Mrs. Ramirez's toddler, Timmy, squealed with delight as he zoomed upward like a helium balloon. Somebody catch my baby. Mike dove forward and snagged Timmy midair. Okay, that's IT, he shouted. Karen, shut this thing off. Now. Karen tossed her hair and scoffed. Oh, don't be so dramatic. This is the future. You should be thanking me. That house just left the neighborhood, I screamed, pointing at Jenkins' house, which was now floating over the next town. Karen waved her hand dismissively. Honestly, Jenkins always complained about my HOA rules. Maybe this is for the best. Karen, turn it off before we all end up in space. She rolled her eyes and finally pulled out a tiny remote from her pocket. Fine, you people have no vision. She pressed a button. Nothing happened. She pressed it again. Still nothing. Karen's face paled. Oh. Mike grabbed her by the shoulders. Oh, what do you mean, oh? Karen gulped. Slight problem. The machine was set to auto-optimize. So, it might not turn off until it reaches peak efficiency. And when is that? She gave an awkward chuckle. Hard to say. But according to the manual, the humming from the machine grew louder. The ground shuddered. Houses started lifting faster. Karen cleared her throat. It, might not stop until we're weightless. Karen, you've turned US into a floating city. I shrieked. Oh, don't be ridiculous. She laughed. It's more of a floating paradise. But the way the entire neighborhood was now rising like a giant UFO told me this was no paradise. We were about to leave Earth entirely. The entire neighborhood was drifting higher by the second. Streetlights, fences, garden gnomes, everything was floating away. Joe was hanging onto his porch rail for dear life. Mr. Jenkins, still spinning in his rocking chair, now waving at passing birds. Mrs. Ramirez, screaming in Spanish while duct taping her toddler to herself. And me? I was 2 seconds away from drop-kicking Karen off her own lawn. Turn it off, Karen, I bellowed. Karen, still standing perfectly poised like this, was a normal Tuesday, sighed dramatically. You people are so ungrateful. We are on the brink of history. We could be the world's first floating civilization. Mike, furiously typing on his laptop, let out a groan. Okay, bad news. If we don't shut this thing down in the next 5 minutes, we might break Earth's atmosphere. You mean we're about to be launched into space? Joe screamed. Mike nodded. Yeah, and I'm pretty sure none of us are NASA certified to survive that. The neighborhood erupted into chaos. People tied themselves to fences with garden hoses. Some folks prayed. Jenkins was still rocking peacefully, now drifting near an eagle. Karen, completely unfazed, adjusted her blazer. Honestly, I don't see the issue. Imagine how much more exclusive our HOA will be once we're in space. You're a menace to humanity, I shouted. And that's when I had an idea. Karen loved rules, right? She worshipped them. Followed them to the letter. So I did the only thing that could possibly stop her. I grabbed my phone and pulled up the HOA bylaws. Karen, I yelled, this anti-gravity nonsense. It violates HOA rule number 17. She gasped. What? Impossible. I turned the screen toward her. HOA properties must be firmly attached to the ground at all times. Karen's eyes twitched. No, no, that can't be. That rule was meant for fences, not entire neighborhoods. Mike jumped in. Yeah, but if we're interpreting HOA laws by your logic, then technically, you're breaking your own rule. Karen's face contorted in horror. I'm violating an HOA rule. I nodded solemnly. Biggest violation in history. And just like that, Karen's entire world crumbled. No, she shrieked, diving for the control panel like a woman possessed. She pressed every button, yanked wires, kicked it until finally, the machine gave a sickly beep and shut down. Everything lurched. For a second, we hung suspended in midair. And then BOM. The entire neighborhood plummeted back toward the ground. It was the most chaotic crash landing of all time. Fences shattered. Lawn gnomes exploded on impact. Mr. Jenkins landed perfectly on his porch like nothing happened. And Karen? Karen fell face first into a muddy flower bed. The moment we all hit the ground, people cheered. Gravity was back. Mike panted. Okay, never, ever calling you again. I nodded. Fair. As people dusted themselves off, one final moment of justice happened. A siren wailed. The HOA's own compliance officer pulled up, clipboard in hand. He took one look at Karen, covered in mud, standing next to a very illegal anti-gravity device, and said, Ms. Whitmore, you have violated HOA rule number 17. You're officially banned from the HOA. Effective immediately. The entire neighborhood exploded into applause. Karen fainted on the spot. And just like that, gravity and sanity returned to Oak Ridge Estates. Like and subscribe for more video like this.